This is Have You Met? My guest today is an original member of the first ever Jamaican bobsled team that inspired the legendary feel-good film Cool Runnings. We talked about the real true story behind the film, including how he went from the dangerous ghetto of Olympic Gardens to the Winter Olympic Games, Cool Runnings FAQs, and his foundation, Keep On Pushing. Have you met Devon Harris? So, Devon, you grew up in Olympic Gardens. From my research, that's not quite as nice and magical as it sounds. So please tell me a little bit more about your childhood and about your early life.
Yeah, I like that word, magical, because they usually say it sounds like the name suggests a suburb of Kingston perched on a hillside, swept by breezes of the Caribbean Sea. But you're right, it's I describe it as one of the toughest ghettos in the world, a shanty town, parts of it anyway. So I grew up in one of those little shacks, 2 rooms, 4 boys, myself included, sleeping on the same bed. So you are aware of the fact that you are in an impoverished neighborhood. It was violent, especially in the 70s, 80s, when gang and political violence was just kind of on the rise in Jamaica. And so there were those moments that were kind of scary. And I used to joke about the fact that at nights when I didn't hear gunshots, it meant it was time to get up and get ready for school.
Mm.
Talk about school. That was my safe place, man. That was my haven. I loved school. I could be free. I could play as much as I want, in primary school, elementary school.
Yeah.
And I guess I always had a competitive side. So there was the competitive nature in the classroom, and then the competitive nature on the football field. I discovered sports and just absolutely love it. So school became my safe place from primary school all the way through to high school.
Wow. So I guess you threw yourself in even harder into school then because of that. It's like an escape.
Yeah. So when I got to high school, from 9th grade all the way to 13th grade, I was in school 6 days a week. I'm very fortunate to grow up in a country because in America, where I live now, you don't have that. But I had, 5 days of regular school, and after school, I was doing doing track or in the French club, or we had a quiz team. I was doing that. And on weekends, on Saturdays, I would go to school and I have track training again, or French club training, or practice, or school challenge, the quiz team.
Mm.
So there was always something there to do that was uplifting and positive, that kept me out of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I was able to live there, but kind of separate myself from what was going on there.
Was there an age where that was particularly hard? Like, was there ever a time in your life where you felt forces kind of dragging you towards that lifestyle, like the crime and whatnot else?
No, because I think from very early on, you start getting into trouble, I guess, teenage years. That's my assumption, I think. But I was so into running then. I started training for track seriously when I was 15. And so that consumed me. That became my focus, right? And I look back now, I'm like, wow, there were opportunities for me to go wander off and do other things, but on a Saturday I would go straight to school, and I would do my training, and that was so. And they call the lifestyle, those activities of getting in trouble and doing that kind of stuff, just never appealed to me. Just never did. So it wasn't as big a push as some might think it was.
Yeah, okay, I understand. And how did you go then from there to the military? How old were you when you joined the military? And I guess you flourished due to that kind of loving being in that kind of that area where you can, push yourself and be on time and all these different kind of things, have lots to do.
Yeah, still working on that. I'm joking. Our educational system, legal, everything is, based on the British system, which you're familiar with. And so in high school, I did O levels and A levels, and on the strength of that, I was able to apply to become an officer in the Jamaica Defense Force, which was a goal. That was one of the other things, right? The sports was an activity, but everything I did when I was in high school was geared toward this idea that at the end of all of this, I'm going to be an army man. I'm going to be an army officer. That was clear. So yeah, at the end of high school, I had my passes at O levels and A levels, and I brought them. Say, hey, I want to be an officer, and so basically that just gave you I describe it as a ticket to the dance, right? That's what opens the door, but you have to go through this rigorous 3-day selection process. And when I turned up, there were 33 of us, man, and before the selection proper got started, we were whittled down to 9. And I just remember thinking, what the hell is going on here? It's like people were just kind of dropping like flies. And we were all shocked. And so the conversation began about, hey, if I don't make it this time, I'm going to reapply in 3 months and 6 months or a year. And I'm just there like dealing with the turmoil inside myself. Like this could end before it even starts for me. And I remember blurting out, I'm not coming back. And they all looked at me, with the look like, oh, he's not serious about being here. and I wasn't really talking to them. I was really talking to myself. And I happened to blurt out aloud. And so when I saw everybody looking at me, I said, I added, I'm not coming back because I'm not going home. And so we went from 33 to 9 to do the selection itself. And in the end, I was the top pick of only 3.
Oh yeah.
Who made? Yeah. So
what kind of stuff did they have you doing in those 3 days?
When I first started, so the selection is done up in the mountains in the training depot, and we had gone into this conference hall, and there were some loose leaves in the back, and I was reading the stuff, Ben, and I could not understand a word. I'm like, my God, if this is an exam, I'm dead. I've failed, right? And it was the exam. It was the exam. But when I was reading this, my nerves were getting the better of me,
Yeah.
So that particular written test was about, in the end, I really want to see how you express yourself in English, in writing, I should say. But more importantly, critical thinking. So they'll lay out some scenarios, and then you'd have to say how you would solve the problem. So they're testing your critical thinking and your ability to express yourself in writing. Then there was an impromptu speech where the officer came around with his beret with little pieces of paper, and I reached in and I picked one word. My word was communism, and he had to give a 3-minute talk on communism. And then, so that was the first evening, and then the next morning was the physical stuff, the obstacle course and the running, and I thought I was fit. But the thing about that, the thing I've been able now to be an officer as one of the selecting officers, right? And you see, okay, so it's not about being the fittest, it's whether or not you're going to quit when you're exhausted, right? And there was no quit in me, so I did really well on that as well. And then they had what in the Army we call a command task. So they'll say, okay, this is what I want you to do. And these are the equipment that you have, and these are the parameters in which you operate. And now what they're testing is to see how well you assimilate instruction, how well you formulate a plan, and then disseminate that plan to the people that you're leading, and how well you lead the task. And turned out I was actually the only guy who finished his in time. I think we had 7 minutes. Yeah, and I'm like, it worked,
Yeah.
And then there was you had to give us a speech as well, a written speech for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. And so mine was written, my speech was written from that summer. I wrote my speech, and every day, I don't know necessarily every day, but I would practice that baby. I'd get up and I would read it. So I remember the night before the obstacle course, some of the guys took their papers out to write, and they brought essays that they had written when they were in high school. And I look at it like there was more red ink that the teacher had drawn through than the blue ink. I'm like, oh, I just read my speech and went to bed. I'm like, you can stay up and write. So I got up the next morning and I killed it, So
yeah. Preparation helps, I guess. Good
yeah,
job. How long after you joined the military was it until you kind of the word bobsled entered your dictionary, until you first heard about this idea?
Yeah, so I back up and say that so in 1984 was my last year in high school. On the quiz team, bobsledding came into my vocabulary.
Okay, got you.
And the Winter Olympics came into my consciousness, because the Olympics were in Sarajevo that year, and so that was kind of one of those current affairs questions. I'm like, oh, there's a Winter Olympics. Oh, cool. Oh, yeah, bobsledding. All right, cool. That's all I knew. And so then at the end of 84, I joined, and I got back from Sandhurst in 86, basically. And so it's a summer of 87, and that's when the idea of the bobsled team came up. And I'm thinking, man, how the hell are you going to train? This is ridiculous. I remember saying, this is the most ridiculous idea ever conceived by man, and nobody can get me to do one of those things, And then my colonel called me one morning as he was walking by my office, and the colonel called you, and you're a second lieutenant. You worry, and I worry because last thing I want is more extra duties. And then he goes, tell Colonel Barnes that you and Lieutenant Wilkie will be going out for the bobsled team trials. That was it. And I'm like, well, yes, sir. And then to myself, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not in trouble. All I have to do is go to the bobsled team trials, But the thing too is that the equations switched the minute he told me I was going to the team trials. Now it went from, man, this is the most ridiculous idea ever, to, oh my God, I have to make this team. I don't know how I'm going to make the team, but I have to make the team. That became my thinking.
Yeah, just like an absolute, you'd do anything to get that at that point.
Yeah, and I didn't know how. I described myself back then as army fit. I could walk 100 miles at 50 pounds on my back and a rifle in my hand. Because when I was at Sandhurst, we walked everywhere. Right? you jump in a coach, and then you get off in the middle of nowhere and you just walk. Thank you.
Yeah.
They call it the functional approach to leadership. Yeah, right. I think I just didn't want to spend the money. Just walk. But yes, I was very fit that way. And but sports fit, I didn't think I was sports fit, in my but do that. I just went there and I worked, just put some effort in, and I say they like my smile, so they selected me.
They needed that charisma on the team.
Possibly.
How long was that process, the selection process for the bobsled?
Kind of 3 days, 2.5 days. The first day was really, I know we'll talk about the movie later. They showed us some of the equipment, the speed suit, the helmet, the spikes. I remember cutting my finger on the spikes, very sharp.
Yeah.
And then they showed us footage of crashes. So that was the first day, and there were about 40 of us that day. And the next day, only about 20 people turned up, and I think it's because of the crashes. I think people.
So that bit in the film is a little bit like, it's got something there. That scene where everybody walks out.
Yeah. It's just like people, and I sat there going, "What the hell am I getting myself into?" But I had to be there. The colonel told me to go.
Yeah.
And so then we had, these physical tests over the next 2 days, sprinting and jumping and lifting weights and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then you found out you got that at the end of those few days. And then what did they tell you is next up? Like, when are you going to be doing some training, and how far away was the Olympics at that point? And what was the general feeling?
So the selection itself was in September 87. the Olympics are in February '88. That's already set, right?
Mm.
So already we're kind of late.
Yeah.
So I left the team trials that Friday, and I went back to the officers' mess, and I just slept, man. I was so exhausted from that 2 days of effort.
Yeah.
And when I woke up on Saturday morning, my friends are calling me the Olympian, because on the sports news they announced that Jamaica had a bobsled team. I was one of the persons named. And then I want to say maybe 2 weeks later, I got an airline ticket, and they say, "Hey, you're going bobsledding." So that's how I knew I was on the team officially.
That's when
And when I
sank in.
turned up at yeah, exactly. So I turned up at the airport, and there were 3 other guys who I recognized from the team trials.
Mm.
And we flew up to New York. Again, this is September. And we saw a bobsled and a bobsled track for the first time. And, you know, we only spent a weekend just kind of seeing what this thing is about. And that's when the journey started, man. We got back to Jamaica, and we started training, running, lifting weights, and we had a makeshift sled on wheels that we would push to practice the start. And then we eventually went to Calgary in October of '87 and went on a bobsled track for the first time. So again, imagine the Olympics are in February, and the first time you're doing this, anything in the sport is in October.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it was I call it a crash course in bobsled.
Yes, apt. What was that first run like on the actual course in the bobsled? The first terrifying.
I was, I had my helmet on. I'm like, I tightened it. It was too tight. I'm like, I'm choking. I loose it. I was too loose. It might fall off. I didn't know what to do with myself.
That's exactly what I would be like. I can picture that.
Yeah. And I remember sitting in the back of the sled and just saying, you know what? If I die, I die. But I'm going.
Yeah.
We had 3 runs that evening, and I remember it so well. By the 3rd run, I was hooked. I was still scared to death. And I remember my driver, I was a brakeman, my driver, Samuel Clayton, we're going through the crash of this big, long 270-degree turn, the one we crashed at during the Olympics. And we're in it, and I'm going, yee-haw! Go, Sammy, go, 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 go.
So I was going to ask like how fun, how exhilarating it is, but I guess you kind of just answered that question. Like it's awesome then.
It's crazy. Like in that moment, I'm filled with total exhilaration, but still scared.
Yeah, just a huge adrenaline boost, which keeps you going.
Yeah,
that's right.
Like, this is my sport, man.
Yeah, but you keep saying you were scared. You had a fear of like speed and maybe heights as well. Am I right?
Yeah, although I jumped from a plane.
Yeah. Yeah, true. How did you get over it for the bobsled? Or like, did you kind of never get over it? Did you just make your peace with it each time and just deal with it?
Yeah, you just, the way you deal with fear in life is that you simply have to face it, and I don't know that you ever get over it. You just like deal with it, and it becomes easier to deal with each time. I would imagine that if I went back to the sport, yeah, the butterflies would be going crazy in my stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just, and then especially when I became a driver, but because you generally, I think we have ultimate confidence in our abilities. I definitely have ultimate confidence in my abilities. So I'm nervous, but I'm the driver, so it's in my hands. I'm controlling my own destiny. So that gives you an added level of comfort, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to try it though. It does look like a lot of fun. Terrifying, but a lot of fun.
Yeah. They call it the champagne of thrills.
Yeah. Oh wow, nice.
Mm-hmm.
How was that first Olympic experience? Not just the games, the build up to it as well. Like, what were kind of people's opinions of you guys, the Jamaican bobsled team? How were you received? How did people react? And I mean that again in the run up to, but also when you got there. Like, how was everybody treating you and things like that?
Yeah, so we in the run up to it, there's so much going on. We don't have much time to learn the sport, to master it in order to get to the Olympics and be respectable. So we were more focused on that. Obviously, we heard the naysayers, oh, you don't belong, you're a pack of jokers, blah, blah, blah. And that's just talk, right? In fact, it's more fuel for us, for me personally. When somebody tells me I can't do something, it's fuel for me to go do it. So we got through that. We got to the Olympic Games. I would say the first thing that struck me getting back to Calgary is how much the city had transformed. We were there in October '87, and yeah, they were building, and you could sense something exciting was about to happen. But when you got there, it was palpable. You could see it, feel it. Buildings were in places where there were only vacant lots, and banners and flags everywhere, so you could feel the energy there. And then the thing I talk about most is marching in the opening ceremonies. If you imagine or can recall, as a kid watching the Olympic Games and watching these men and women marching in, and you're going, wow, those are some of the best athletes in the world. And then this day, you are setting foot in an opening ceremony, and there are 50,000 people screaming, and you look off to your right, and I promise you, more cameras than you can count. And in this moment, because you've seen the movie before, your image is on TV around the world, and there's some little kid looking at you going, wow, he must be one of the best athletes in the world, and you're hoping you can live up to that. But you're also in that moment living the dream, right? Because as athletes, we all want to represent our country, and especially the Olympic Games. And here I was doing it, and in a rather special way as well, as a Jamaican at the Winter Olympics. So just amazing from that point of view. And I talk a lot too about just the experience of being in the village. It's 1988, way before social media and so on. So you're shut off from the rest of the world. You're in what I call utopia. It's just you and other people from around the world who, under normal circumstances, you'd never meet. And you, especially in '88 for me personally, because we were still at the height of the Cold War, the world was. And I'm a newly minted army officer, and they told me that everyone behind the Iron Curtain was evil. And here I am in the village, I'm in the game arcade, and I'm killing the Pac-Man, right? So I know I'm dating myself, but I'm a Pac-Man kind of guy. And, off to my left is a guy from Poland, off to my right, a guy from, East Germany. And you realize, my God, the only real difference between us is ideology. We suffer from the same human frailties and foibles, and, have the very similar aspirations. And so, in the village, you get to really enjoy, really appreciate our humanness, our humanity. That you see that there are the differences that divide us are really pale in comparison to the things that bind us and that we have in common.
I couldn't agree anymore. Yeah,
right away from the experience.
Yeah, I think the different countries, like people from different nationalities, it's just a bigger scale of somebody from the next village, right? It's just, you're just born somewhere different to somebody else, and maybe have different, you look a bit different, or you have some different kind of cultures or something from that, behaviors that you've learned that other people do, that they've done in that area. And, there's going to be things on the surface like that are different, but at the end of the day, you're just from a different village. Countries, like by the actual name, it's just a bit of land, right? It's just a bit of land that we've said, like, this has a flag now, and this is going to be called this. But at the end of the day, we're all just people. Yeah, it's powerful.
People are people, man. I agree with you.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that first Olympic experience, because again, it must have been so overwhelming and stuff. Like, in terms of the Jamaican bobsleigh thing in the film, obviously they have a bit of a scene and they make a bit of a theme about you guys being laughed at, right? Like, so which sport are you here for? Bobsled? Which country? Jamaica? So was it a bit like that? Was there a lot of people laughing at you, or did you have a lot of the kind of underdog support? Like when there's a kind of that underdog, people want to back you.
Yeah, so that storyline in the movie isn't true at all. None of it about people laughing because Jamaicans are here. Go figure. Or the stuff with the East Germans, belittling us. Nobody would want to berate us. We're Jamaicans, man. We're cool. People like us. Yeah. And then the flip side of that, I'd say, is that we're from Jamaica. We don't take crap from anybody. So that wasn't going to fly either, you know.
Yeah.
So many things were happening, you know. It's, you're there at the Olympics, you're enjoying the experience, you're kind of feeling proud of the accomplishment. But for us, especially, I describe it as we were working overtime because we still were very new in the sport. We knew we didn't know everything. There was still much to learn. So we were, when other teams were chilling, we were on the push track, like pushing like hell, which in hindsight was not necessarily a smart thing. It was just too much.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. When other teams were on the track and we were not getting ready to go down, we were out there watching, trying to learn. You know, we're watching everybody, the very good ones and the not so good ones, to see if there's something you can pick up. So always working. And then if you can imagine, let's say you went to World Cup soccer finals, and that's the first time you're seeing Messi and Ronaldo and all these big names. That was the first time. The Olympic Games were the first time we're seeing the big names in our sport.
Yeah.
That was our first major competition, and you just kind of sat there, like, eyes and mouth wide open. So, kind of thing, and soaking in the environment. So we were there, I would say, doing three things: working hard, trying to learn, and competing.
Yeah.
Same time.
Well, you're probably working harder than any of the other bobsled teams at that Olympics, I suppose, just because of them having the experience. And yeah, they probably wouldn't even dispute it, I don't think. So on that Olympics, one thing they did get right in the film is that you did have that really nice start, didn't you, to that? Was it the third run, I think, or one of your runs? You had that 7th fastest time. Tell me about that run. Obviously that finished in that crash, which just looks horrible. It looks brutal. I listened to it the other day with the commentary, and like even I'm looking at it, and the guy goes, look at the head. He's like, that doesn't look good. Look at that. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm thinking that neck looks broken there. It was not nice to watch, but you guys all stood up and were okay, so that's good. But tell me about it. Tell me about that run and the ending to that run.
The commentator, one of them anyway, John Morgan, who I know, I bust his balls all the time. I'm like, John, what kind of stupid advice is that? Stay in the sled, guys. Stay in the sled. Where do you think we're going to go, John? It's like we can't even hear it, man.
I guess, the only alternative is you try to crawl out. And
I bust his nuts all the time.
You did say that. Stay in the sled. You got to stay in the sled.
Yeah, and I was like, really, John? Is that the best you can do? Kind of thing. But I go back to the day before. So it probably is true that our 4-man bobsled race in '88 was the first and probably the only time in Olympic history any athlete or group of athletes has ever competed in an event, and that event was the first time they were doing it. So when we did the 4-man race at the Olympics in Calgary, that was our first 4-man race ever.
Wow.
Ever. So we're in the
before that, sorry, just to quickly interrupt, were you preparing for just a 2-man before that, or what was okay, so it was going to be like 2 of you were going to race on the day, and there were going to be 2 backups, that kind of thing, or 2 teams?
Yeah, we actually initially started out with 2 drivers. My driver Sammy, he didn't quite make it to the Olympics, so we're down to one 2-man team, kind of thinking that we could do a 4-man, but we had never raced a 4-man sled before.
Wow. Yeah.
So let's put that in perspective, right? And so the first day, so we didn't have a sled, obviously, and we started out the week with this old rickety sled that looked almost as bad as the one in the movie. Not quite. And then we rented a sled from the Canadians and painted it up and all that good stuff. And so that first run, as we were pushing off, and Dudley, who was the driver, as he is leaping into the sled, his push bar collapses. And so he ends up sitting, and there's photo photos online of him kind of sitting on the side of the sled as he kind of swither himself inside the sled.
Yeah.
All right, but we got down. On the second run, he got in, okay. I get in behind him, and Michael White, who's behind me, his spikes are stuck in my thighs.
Oh, no.
And so he's kind of standing up. I'm trying to dislodge him. Like, I'm holding on to the tip of these spikes and I'm trying to dislodge them. And we're sliding through corner 1 and 2. And people are like, sit down, sit down. I'm like, we know. And I'm really worried. I'm like, man, this is not going to be a good ride for him. You know, he's going to get hurt or we're probably going to crash. Yeah. But I was able to dislodge and he sat down and we had a decent run. So then now, second day of the Olympics, it just, you know, Michael left his helmet at the village. We had to run back to go get it, you know, as we were getting ready to go to the track. But then all is well. We get to the track. Dudley, who's the driver, goes off to walk the track, because the drivers always do that. And the rest of us, we're working on the sled and we'll put it on the truck. We take it to the top and we're good. We're waiting for the race to start. And Dudley gets to the top and he walks into the warm house. The warm house is where you hang out before you go down the track. Looking quite unhappy. What happened? During this track walk, he slipped on the ice and he sprained his collarbone. You know, so the British physio, Roy Hunt, gets a magic spray, fixes him up and he's good to go. And then we go on the start line. And yes, we didn't know what time it was at the time, but we pushed the 7th fastest start time.
Did it feel fast? Did it feel fast?
It felt good. Everything, I don't know, I can't remember if it felt fast, but it just felt good. And the loading, the getting on the sled, I call it poetry in motion. It just worked. Bam. There's no hiccup, you know? Yeah. Unfortunately, it means that Dudley is really seeing a new track of sorts because he has never gone so fast before. So, you know, he's seeing a new track. And as we're heading down the track and everything feels good, we get out of corner 8 and we hit the wall. And I'm like, okay, there's a long straightaway before 9, so we should be fine. And then we hit the wall again just before 9. I'm like, okay. Not good, but we should be fine. We're gonna do the wave, you call it, right? So if you watch the film or footage of that run, you'll see the sled kind of going in and out of the camera frame. And so I expected that, and I expected that we would go around the end of the corner, get off and slam into the wall, but then continue on our merry way. And what happened, in fact, is that, as I saw in the film, at the point when the sled should have been going down, we were coming up. And there was nowhere left for us to go but over. Yeah. And you know, I remember, you know, when I went over and people asked, weren't you scared for your life? No, I was just embarrassed, man. I remember thinking, oh my God, we're over, how embarrassing. And, you know, we kind of, a crash lasts a few seconds, but it feels like a half a lifetime. You know, it's just, you hear the horrible sound of the sled running, sliding over the ice. You see flashes of white as the ice goes by, and you smell the fiberglass of the sled burning. It's and you're claustrophobic. You can't really move. Yeah. So you just hang on for dear life until it stops, and that's what we did. It just kind of hung on there and came to a stop, and everybody was fine. So you know, we got up and we did not lift the sled as Cool Runnings suggests. It makes no sense. A sled weighs 650 pounds.
Yeah, and it looks like a coffin.
And with no straight edges, it's very difficult to lift. We have what you call the articulation. So the front and the back is not one piece, so it moves. So imagine you're lifting that thing and it gets unbalanced and it falls on you, you know?
Yeah. That would be the real sad story of the Olympics.
That would be a crash. Yeah. So no, we just pushed it off. I was leading the group and feeling rather dejected, and people were so kind, so generous, cheering, we love you, we love you. one guy reached over to shake my hand, and as I did, I started to have to shake like every other hand as we tried to exit stage right.
How did that feel? How did you, like, your emotion must have been in a, like, all over the place, going from the kind of, like you said, you felt embarrassed when you went over, to having people clap and you're all walked away from the accident. And how were your emotions doing there?
Yeah, so in that moment, they made us, feel a little better. But yeah, you felt like we're losers, man. You just fail in front of the entire world. You just let down your entire country. It's a big thing, to have the hopes and aspirations of a nation on your shoulder, and we're falling short. So we're just trying to get out of the limelight. But people were so gracious to us. You can't ignore that, and it did make you feel better in the moment. But
lifted you up a bit. Yeah. No, that's it must be hard. Like you said, the embarrassment came in. I mean, I think anybody, their brain would tell them, like, don't forget how many people are watching. Like that would
that was a thought that came to my head, man. As soon as we went up, I'm like, oh my God, we're over. How embarrassing. But maybe the worst part of that, though, Ben, is that we had given credence to all those people who felt we didn't belong. We just crashed.
That was to be the worst bit. No, for sure. But yeah, you said it felt like half a lifetime, but it looked like half a lifetime. That bobsleigh looked like it slid forever, man. I'm not joking. It looked like it just continued and continued. You guys must be like, oh, can it stop so we can check we're alive and stuff? Like, yeah, unbelievable. So moving on from the crash, then, what was the continued reaction like after the Olympics, for the rest of the Olympics, and just for the kind of, I guess, the year after that, or whatever, the few months after that? How was it? You probably were very different to before, I imagine.
Yeah, so I tell you this, people were very supportive all around. For us, I mean, we knew we were always going to come back and compete again in the Olympics, but that crash made it really solidify that decision. Like there's no other choice but to come back and compete. And then, I talk about disappointing a nation. We were worried about heading back to Jamaica, man, because, we are people who don't like losing. And here it is that we had crashed and, in my mind, embarrassed the country. But people were so supportive. I mean, they were making excuses for us, excuses that we didn't use. They were like, Jamaica is a tropical country and we don't have snow. You guys have done so well. And while that is true, we never once leaned on the crutch, on the fact that we are from a tropical country, so we may not do well. We always believe that we should do well, despite the fact that we're from a tropical country. But if they were saying, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Thank you. But the government also made stamps with our faces on it, which was pretty cool. So
oh wow.
I get a letter from a friend, and there's a stamp on it, on the envelope with my face.
Wow, that's cool. And I bet there's still some collectors with that and pride of possession there.
Yeah, I suppose. You know what, dude? I don't have any of those stamps. The original ones I got, I lost them completely. And maybe 20 years ago, a friend bought me some from a stamp collector, and I don't know where they are either. It's terrible.
Oh no. Well, if anybody watching or listening has any stamps with Devon's face on it,
I would really appreciate it. Maybe they're in a book on my bookshelf. I don't know. I wish I knew where.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. I'd like to see them, but I'm sure they'll turn up one day, or hopefully some strange person is gonna give you some stamps with your face on. Let's move on to the film a little bit more. So you made it clear, and I'm aware that it's loosely, we'll use that word strongly, loosely based on you and your teammates and your story. But do you still feel like it's your story? Do you feel like ownership over it, or is it all just kind of Disney fluff?
No, I mean, it's definitely inspired by our story. I know there is a lot of poetic licensing that was taken with it, but yeah, it's our story. There was only ever one Jamaican bobsled team in 1988, and that was our team. So yeah. That's our story for sure.
So did the sled really have a name?
Interesting question. It certainly wasn't Tallulah. Our team used the moniker Ragamuffin. We call ourselves Ragamuffin, and so yeah, I guess you could say the sled was also Ragamuffin. And that name, it's a word we use in Jamaica.
Yeah, I've heard the word. I know the word. Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, hardy, something it means, tattered and ragtag, but it's for us, it's a kind of, it denotes a can-do attitude. And that we embrace that because of a Jamaican boxer out of the UK, Lloyd Ragamuffin Honeygun, who was almost Mike Tyson-esque. He would get in the ring and he would just handle his business. And he called himself a ragamuffin. And we really liked his attitude and his that can-do spirit. So we embraced that and called ourselves the Ragamuffin. Now,
love it.
And he was pretty successful. So here it is now. It's a first season, and we were in Austria, and we were heading back to Jamaica for Christmas, flying through London. And guess who's on the flight? Lloyd Ragamuffin Honeygun. Really? So Dudley Stokes decides, hey, we should sell him a shirt, because the shirt says Ragamuffin, like Jamaica Bobsled has Ragamuffin on the sled.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, cool. So I follow Dudley up to first class, where he is, and Dudley makes a speech, Mr. Honeygun, and we're in the Jamaica Bobsled team, and he makes a speech, and Lloyd Honeygun is just looking at him going, noise. Didn't buy the shirt, did not buy the shirt. The flight attendant came, kicked us out of first class, and he never won another bout. I'm like, that's what you get for not supporting the team, man.
That's exactly what you get. What goes around comes around, right?
I might be excited about him not winning another bout, but yeah, that started his decline for sure.
On the subject of fighting and brawling and stuff, so we've got the sled's name confirmed is Ragamuffin. Yeah, we're gonna go with that. Yeah, the team and the sled. But yeah, on the subject of fighting, and I think I know the answer to this one, but yeah, there was no bar fight. No, okay, so we'll move swiftly on from that one.
Bar fight. We were in bed by 9, man. We had a 9 o'clock curfew.
Yeah,
to start a bar fight before 9. I was so upset. But yeah, I'm just kind of lying there looking up at the ceiling at 9. Yeah, all night. Yeah. 9 o'clock.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. They took artistic license. I mean, it was a good scene, so we'll let them have it. But yeah. Okay. So, which bits, contrary to the bits that didn't happen and that were pure poetic license, which bits would you say were the most accurate? And I know there's going to be lots of bits that are just boringly accurate, but are there any things that maybe seemed like they wouldn't have necessarily been accurate that were, or things that were based on something that wasn't, the exact?
Really good question, and I've never really thought of it that way, like which is the most accurate, and hard to find one. What is most accurate is the way that they depicted the spirit of the team. Underdogs fighting to overcome versus any one particular fact. Because the facts, quote, and I use the word loosely, is they're all stretched or they're made up stuff, So the way they depicted the spirit of the team, I think, would be the most accurate thing about them.
Did they get the spirit of Jamaica right as well? Like where they're like showing the people in the kind of, I don't know, cafe bar kind of, communal place, watering hole, and everybody's like cheering you guys on, and they're like, oh, where did they say these guys are from? And everybody's, Jamaica, and
so they got the spirit right, but the facts there, nobody was in any bar or cafe in Jamaica watching us. I don't believe that. I don't believe that was happening. People are still trying to spell bobsled, let alone know what it is.
Yeah, maybe a few TVs like in back rooms, but not quite
I'm pretty sure it wasn't being carried. I'm pretty sure the results and a 30-second clip on the sports news. Yeah, it's all you could have hoped for back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for sure, Jamaicans love their teams, and they cheer and demonstrate that kind of pride in their teams the way they're depicted in the movie.
Yeah, awesome. And so in terms of who you would associate with, I've heard you answer this question. You would associate with Yul Brynner, right? The guy, the baldy, as we can say there. It's a good hairstyle. Yeah. And I know that you've been spoken to by Ruth Gotian, who I did an episode with, who's writing a book on successful people and all that, and you are obviously a dreamer.
Are you in her book?
Sorry?
Are you in Ruth's book?
Oh no, I'm nowhere near successful enough for that. No, I just wanted to talk to her and find out what the kind of things she found from speaking to all of you amazingly successful people. But yeah, so where was I going to go with that? So Ruth Gotian, I've completely lost my train of thought. That's excellent.
You're asking about, you see, that's what happens when the interviewee jumps in and messes things up. I
was going to say,
and him being a dreamer.
Yeah, so I was about you. Yeah, Yul Brynner. So yeah, you the Buckingham Palace dream, and just Yul's general kind of, you can tell this man is driven, motivated. You can tell like he knows that he doesn't know necessarily exactly where he wants to end up, but this guy knows he wants to, in this instance, he wants to leave Jamaica. He wants to go on to bigger and better things. He wants to see the bright lights and everything like that. And some people said, I think maybe it was you said, like, he's the mean one. Oh, so you're the mean one. I don't think Yul is mean. I would like to take a stand for Yul, and I think Yul's a good guy. I think he's just prickly and, has like a bit of a self-defense thing going on. Because once he warms up later in the film, I watched it again recently. Once she warms up later in the film to Junior, what a guy, man. Stand-up guy. But anyway, do you see yourself in this guy mostly because of his, I guess, motivation and determination, perseverance, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, I talk about him being the mean one because that's what people say to me. You're the mean one. But the dude was just frustrated. And I think when you are as driven and ambitious as he is, and you came so close, man, to get that break, and some fool come and trip you up, right? Yeah, you're not going to be all smiles and happy face, right? So yeah, I will take the word prickly.
That's you, not you. I'm not saying.
No, but I think it's human, right? Like I said, if you're burning with such ambition, and you invest so much time and effort and energy, and then to see it mess up, and really not through any fault of your own. Yeah. As the movie tells the story, it's a hard pill to swallow. And it's going to take you a while to kind of work through the disappointment and the anger and the trauma of falling short. But it doesn't kill your dream, right? And so I talk about him and the fact that he had no interest in being on the team until he realized, you know what, this is my shot. If I want to get off of this island, this is my shot. And so all of us, I call it the WIIFM. We all listen to the same radio station, What's in It for Me. And that's what he saw, being on the team, a chance to achieve his goals. And I'm not interested in being anybody's teammate according to him. He figured, let me put in some work here. We don't need to be friends. I just need to achieve this thing. But what I've discovered, and we didn't have those dynamics on the team for real, but what I know from being on the team is that when you're working on something that is so huge, so challenging, you're going to come together in every aspect if it's going to work. And once each of you individually have made the commitment that I'm going to do everything to make this work, it's not like you have a choice to become friends. You're going to become friends, at least for this. Right? And so that you saw that transformation of Yul going from, being prickly to being supportive of Junior, for example, and, wanting to kiss Sanka Lucky Egg and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I love the journey. It's great.
You wanted to get some of that good luck,
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's great. So I asked you kind of some of the most accurate or least accurate, but tell me some things or anything that that happened in real life that maybe could have and should have been in a film, but that didn't make it. I know one example is you had this last minute replacement. So it'd be great if you tell me a little bit about that, what happened with that. And just, if there's any other little things that happened that you thought that should have been in, that should have been.
Yeah, so actually what I discovered many years later from reading my teammates Chris Stokes' book was that his brother Dudley Stokes was conniving, scheming all along to have his brother on the team. We didn't know that though.
Really?
So we're in Calgary, and Chris was not on the team. He was on a track scholarship up in Idaho, and he comes to the Olympics to watch his brother race, and it's all cool. I'm like, Chris is a cool dude, and he's a good athlete. Don't get me wrong, right? So Caswell, I talk about the fact that we had a 9 o'clock curfew. There was a guy called Caswell Allen and Freddie Powell. They were also on the team as well. Caswell was more the athlete. Freddie was more a marketing gimmick, for want of a better term. And they went out. They went partying while the rest of us serious athletes were still in the village. And the next day, Caswell fell on the push track, tripped. He got some bruises. I think the worst of it was his ego. But that now became the excuse, because if we were going to do a 4-man, Freddie was not going to be on the team. I mean, he's not that kind of athlete, right? So that became the excuse to get Chris on the team. Oh, one of the guys got hurt. Caswell wasn't hurt that way. But that was a story. So, but again, Chris was a good athlete and he made a valuable contribution. You know, he was probably a better athlete than Caswell actually. So it worked out in that sense. The thing about our story and how bizarre it is, and I say it often, that if they were to tell the story exactly as it happened, people would probably not believe it. So if you were to tell the story that, you know, we're at the Olympic Games and then we decided we're going to do enter the 4-man, which we had never done before, and we're going to recruit a guy and in 3 days teach him how to push a sled and get him on the sled and push the 7th fastest start time at the end of the week, people wouldn't believe it. But that's what happened. So when I think about what wasn't included, which I don't think about often because it was so far out of left field, I'm not sure what that would be to make it believable anyway and entertaining.
Yeah. But those are good ones. The fact that you decided to do the 4-man while there and then, had to find a replacement or ended up getting a replacement for the 4-man while there. Those are two unbelievable twists and turns that you didn't expect when you went there, which is insane. So tell me, if you'd never made the team back then in your army days, if you'd never had that call or whatever, I'm not saying you didn't make it through the selection, but if for one reason or another you hadn't gone for it or you hadn't made it or you hadn't got it, whatever, what do you think you'd be doing now? How do you think your life would have unfolded?
So I often say that if you had asked me when I was 21 what I'd be doing today, I'd tell you I'd still be in the army. And that could probably be true. I'm not 100% sure. It's been so many years.
Yeah, of course.
More than likely would have spent more time in the army than I did. What I know is that bobsledding definitely influenced me leaving the army when I did. Why? Because, when I was growing up in Olympic Gardens, and if you had asked me, what kind of life I'd like to live before I get to heaven, it would be to be an army officer. I'm like, what else could I want? And then I became an army officer and it was amazing. And it's just, wow, dream come true. And then I became a bobsledder and I started traveling and seeing more of the world, especially after the Olympics, doing these promotional events and seeing a world that I never could have imagined. When I was in Olympic Gardens and going, whoa, so you're telling me that all of this is out here too? Wow, I want some of that, right? And,
Yeah.
and the only way to get it is to leave the army. So, you have to blame bobsledding for that.
Did you just to quickly ask you this? I meant to ask you earlier, but we kind of skipped past it. So when you were living in Olympic Gardens, did you ever, or just in general when you were younger, did you dream of the Olympics? I mean, obviously not the Winter Olympics in bobsled, but did you dream of going to the Olympics?
When I was 15 was when that started. I started running track, and I tell the story of ABC Wild Roller Sports out of America here had a series called Road to Moscow. Because the Olympics were coming up in Moscow the following year in 1980, and they would showcase these athletes from around the world. And what I took away from that series was how average and ordinary these athletes were. Just like human beings like you and I, right? But they had these extraordinary dreams and an equally extraordinary desire to make those dreams happen. And I'm like, oh, so I could become an Olympian then if I just decide to dream big enough and work hard enough. And so that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, and you did. So not nice. How does it feel to have inspired one of the greatest feel-good films of all time? Like, I know it's not word for word your story, but if you guys hadn't have done what you did, if you'd been for, not very nice people without, it might never have happened the way it did. But you are one of the men responsible for that film. So how does that feel to have given so much joy to so many people and pick up so many people when they're feeling low and all that kind of stuff?
That's kind of stuff that Hollywood movies are made of. I never could have imagined when I was in Olympic Gardens and dreaming about getting out of the hood that Hollywood would make a movie about part of my life. Like, where do you begin to start dreaming that, right? So it's very flattering, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it because it has given our story a very long life as well.
Yeah, and it's an important story, I think, for people to hear. So it's awesome. Let's talk for 5 minutes about this logo on your shirt here. So that's your Keep On Pushing Foundation, yeah?
Yeah, it's my everything. It's the message I deliver when I give corporate keynote speeches, and it's the name of my foundation. Absolutely.
Do you want to spend 5 minutes just telling me about it, about the foundation, what kind of stuff
sure.
you do and things like
So as you know from Olympic Gardens, and so back in 2006, I went back to the old neighborhood, went to my old primary school or elementary school, depending on where you are listening to this. And I was having a chat with the principal. I sound very British saying that. I was having a chat with the principal. That's what happens when you end up in an interview with a guy from Britain. You start sounding like them. But
I hate to be this guy. I've got to do it though. I've got to say we called him headmaster or headmaster. Principal's American, man. I'm sorry.
You're right. You see, I've become Americanized.
You're American.
You are right. As a headmaster, you're right. Yeah. Oh my God.
I'm sorry to do that.
Elizabeth Doolittle, what's to come of me? This is a typical Pygmalion story right here, man. Oh my word. Anyway, so
you're with the headmaster.
The headmaster. And I was asking him about the challenges that the biggest challenge that he was facing. It was that the kids were coming to school hungry. And if you're hungry, you don't learn. If you're not learning, you don't get educated, and you can't become a contributing member of society. And I mean, I'm one of those kids. I know what that entailed, right? I grew up in that environment, and I spent 8 years in the army where I actually went back to the old neighborhood looking for the bad boys as well. So I've lived this story from both ends. And so that sparked the idea to start the foundation. And we started a breakfast program. We have served about 6,000 kids or 6,000 meals during that time. We've started a school supplies program, school bags and books and pencils and so on. Supported about 10 schools with that. We just built a sick bay at the school, which the Brits would understand. From our American friends, I have to say, it's kind of like a nurse's station. And then we on the verge of setting up a computer lab, actually. And that will be used, obviously, for instruction for the kids within the school, but it will double as what I'm calling a digital academy to provide technical training to the young people in the communities as well. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's, my way of giving back. Yeah, I so believe that they all have potential, every one of them. And they more than likely won't necessarily become a bobsledder, may have no interest in joining the army, but they have the very similar potential to excel the way I was able to as well, coming from an environment like that.
Yeah, in whatever their own bobsled or their own Olympics, whatever that's going to be. And
Exactly.
Maybe one of them will surprise you and be a Jamaican bobsledder in the future.
That would be cool, actually. I still be number one.
And they'll call the sled Devon, or Ragamuffin, keeping up the tradition. Exactly. But I'll put the links to that to keep on pushing, and so anybody that wants to learn more about it, go and check that out, and obviously you can donate and all that kind of thing. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So to finish us off today, Devon, I know you've been kind of dropping wise words and inspirational things all throughout here, but I'll ask you if you want to give any kind of specific message to people. It could be about anything. I'll preface it to say it doesn't have to be inspirational. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It could be just anything you want, Devon. So if you've got any words that you want to finish us out with.
I actually will talk about reference keep on pushing, because obviously it has a bobsled analogy. That's how you start the race. You push the sled, and when you're watching it, you think it's one massive movement, but it's not. It's actually a process. As you're going down the track, you're still pushing against the ice conditions and the weather conditions, and you're pushing against the limits of your own abilities. And so it reminds me of the success journey of life, right? It's this dynamic, ever-changing, fluid process through which all of us are pushing. We're striving to transform ourselves. And in the process, you are inspiring and you're transforming the people around you as well. So it's really about growth, that thing that I think as human beings we are created to do. I mean, we naturally grow, from being a fetus to a newborn, et cetera, but success requires us to grow in a deliberate way, right? When you push anything, it's a deliberate action as well. And it's not just one push, it's a process. And so that's where keep on pushing comes from. And that's my encouragement and my challenge to everyone as well, that you have to find a way to keep on pushing every single day in every area of your life, personally, professionally, individually, and collectively as a team as well, in order to give yourself a shot at achieving your full potential.
Yeah, keep on pushing. I love it. Thank you so much for that, Devon. Thank you so much, and thank you for today. This was awesome. I've been a fan of the film since I was a kid. I told you earlier, so this was really cool. Kind of surreal a little bit, but yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for sharing your life, and have a good one.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for having this platform as well to share, the amazing messages. You're doing amazing work. And so I encourage everyone to continue to listen and support and share it with the world.
Thanks so much, Devon. Take care, man.
Take care of yourself, bro.
Thanks for listening to that conversation with the one and only Devon Harris. I hope you enjoyed it. Please scroll into the description for our links, Devon's links, and much more. If you're still listening, please go and check out another of our episodes and consider subscribing. Be nice, be happy, be cool runnings.